everyone, and welcome to the live stream. And today I'm here with Serena Lowe, and Serena is the host of the Quiet Warrior podcast. Hi, Serena.
Hello, Limor. We speak again.
Yeah, and Serena, today we're talking about something that very close to my heart, and I think very relevant to a lot of women, especially women in engineering and tech. How do you become more visible when you're naturally quiet? You're not very loud. And perhaps, Serena, we can start with you. So, your path is kind of interesting. You're from Singapore, you live in Australia for 20 years, you was a lawyer, and now you coach quiet high performers. So, if you look back, Serena, what was the moment that current you knew that you couldn't stay in law anymore?
I can remember the exact moment, Limor. It
Really?
was at a legislative amendment meeting. It was really exciting kind of a afternoon meeting where we're just poring over a piece of legislation and we were talking about amending it, updating it. So we have to look at, punctuation, we look at words, look at shifting things, cutting things, where or what should we amend and what's going to happen with the sections before and after, all very exciting stuff. And in the middle of that meeting, my senior suddenly looked at me and my colleague and said, "Do you know where you will be if you continue on this path?" And it was such a strange question to ask in the middle of a work meeting. I hadn't expected it. I hadn't thought along those lines. And I thought, oh, I never thought of that before. I just assumed I was always going to be a lawyer. I would just keep doing this till I retire. And when he asked that question, I suddenly had this picture of myself, fast forwarding, let's say 30 years into the future, and then looking back at my journey, at what I've accomplished. And I had a question to myself. And that question was, what if there was something else I was meant to do with my life? But
Yeah.
because I was so fixated on that one path, and I thought that's the only path for me, that's the correct path, I shouldn't think of anything else, I missed out on all the other opportunities and all the adventures I could have had. And that question haunted me.
Yeah. I think this is interesting. Like, just you pause and thought about your future, right? You thought about what the future will look like,
Mm.
and the thinking of just staying a lawyer I guess, wasn't appealing enough for you. You thought there should be something else.
At that time, also, there were a couple of things going on. There was restructuring, there was a lot of uncertainty. Staff morale was a little bit down, people were worried about the future. And I think in the midst of all that, I was also re-evaluating. I had just had my first child, and also I had had a miscarriage after that. And so I was doing some, I guess, reflecting and pondering the future, thinking about options and so on. And so this question came at the perfect time. It sort of shook things up a little. It made me uncomfortable enough to keep thinking about it. But before that, life was going in a certain direction. It was smooth. It was, on the outside, it just looks like you're doing all the right things. You're ticking all the boxes. You're going to work and you're achieving professionally. And there's really nothing to complain about. You're having a good life.
Yeah.
But then there's also the part of you that knows or that feels that you could do more or you could do something different. And there's a curious part to us, a part that I think probably started back in childhood when we were our most curious and our most open. And you start
Yeah.
going, looking back at those things and wondering what happened to that version of you. Like, where did that go? Where did that 7-year-old, 10-year-old version of me disappear to over the years? So that was an interesting time.
And how did you find out what you actually want to do? So you started a quiet warrior. So between the time you left being a lawyer to starting lawyer. Sorry, I'm, I'm mispronouncing that. The quiet warrior. What happened between those two those two things?
The way I describe that period is the messy middle. I called it the emotional and spiritual wilderness because for a few years after that, after I left the law, I had an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was anymore. You know, those forms that they make you fill sometimes when you're applying to things, and then you have to say what your status is, what your job is, or occupation is. And suddenly I couldn't put the obvious thing anymore because I wasn't in the system anymore. The question is, what am I now? I
Yeah.
haven't figured out my plan B. I haven't got there yet. I'm in between. So, how do I describe myself? So, that was really an identity crisis for a couple of years. So I didn't go straight into what I do now. I went by a very, very long detour, very non-linear, very messy, tried a lot of different things, lots of things that didn't work out, and eventually some things did work out, and here we are.
So trying a lot of things, exploring. And where did this name Quiet Warrior came from?
It came from 7 years of training in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So when my two kids were learning martial arts, I used to sit around waiting for them for that hour, and then I'll be watching all these people doing all these things. And I thought, I wonder what it's like to be part of the adult class. You know, I don't know anything about martial arts. I've always been what is at school, I was like a PE dropout, very physically uncoordinated. So anything to do with sports, I would like, no, no, you know,
Very
I'm
much
not wired.
relatable to me.
I'm not wired that way. I'm too clumsy, too uncoordinated. But I thought, gee, that looks fun. And so I was in my 40s when I started martial arts, and I trained for 7 years. Never made it to black belt. I got up to green belt, and that was enough for me because it was by then it was so intense, so physically
Yeah.
intense. But what it did teach me in that 7 years, it in a sense it rewired me from the inside out. It made me face certain things I had been avoiding. Just the physicality of it, being that close to someone else who is trying to attack you and you're trying to defend yourself, defend your space. You learn a lot instantly about boundaries. You learn about healthy anger. You learn how to face those conflicting emotions and you notice what comes up straight away. The things that
Yeah.
were wired into us as children, the automatic reactions, whether I fight back or whether I freeze, whether I try to run away, all those things that you've, intellectually suppressed because you were conditioned to stay logical, don't make trouble, keep the peace, and so on. But when you actually have to defend yourself, you discover who you are. And you also discover that there is more inside you. And so that the quiet warrior, that phrase came out of that period.
Wow. I think there's several things I already learned. First of all, like for our listeners here, you can always start something new. It's not too late to start.
Mhm.
And kind of, I heard from you that this practicing martial arts and needing to kind of respond, right, uh, helped you learn more about yourself. I think also the sense of achievement, right, of being able to start something. You said, oh, I wasn't like the sporty kind of girl. And now in my 40s, I'm trying something completely different. And I'm actually able to do that.
Yes,
That by
actually able
itself
to do
is
that.
really helping, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. You suddenly discover there's more to you than you knew.
Yeah,
It's so exciting.
fantastic. And you talk about kind of identity shift from an achiever to a warrior. What does that look like?
So the achiever is the one that most introverts are familiar with because that's been our conditioning. We are taught that if we want to be accepted, if we want to belong, if we want to be respected, we have to do more and keep doing more. We have to be perfect. We have to keep notching up those wins. But with a warrior, it's a different thing. You're still quiet. That the quiet part doesn't change because there's nothing wrong with being quiet. It's not a flaw, it's not a weakness. But the warrior is the one who stands firm in the face of crisis, in the face of difficulty. They can stay calm, they can see what's happening, they're not running away from it, they are facing it, and they're demonstrating courage and leadership. And that's the part that is an identity shift, a transformation. When you're coming from the achiever mindset of always being in your head, always having to have the right answers, having certainty, I need to control this situation, I need to fix this thing. But then you face something you've never faced before, and it's making you feel vulnerable, making you feel unsafe, making you feel, I have no idea what's going on, everything is taken away from me, and I don't know how to respond to this situation. The warrior is the one that's able to stay with that uncertainty without running away, without saying, I can't handle this. Because usually there's something bigger that is keeping them going. And that bigger thing is usually not themselves because they are not so good at prioritizing themselves, but they're very good at prioritizing the bigger picture and other people. So the way I invite introverts and quiet achievers to reflect on this is if you are in a position where you have a voice, where you have some kind of influence or some skills, and somebody else doesn't. And if by staying quiet, you're depriving them of the ability to be seen and heard, are you able to step up if the opportunity is given to you to lead, to speak up, to take some kind of action? Or are you going to say, sorry, I'm an introvert, I can't do public speaking, I can't go to networking events, I can't do small talk? So it's inviting them into that larger version of themselves, the elevated version, the upgrade, where they think of it as, oh, I have a moral responsibility to use my gifts and talents because I've been put in this position for such a time as this. I can do something, I can contribute, I can say something, even if I say it quietly. So that's when the evolution, the journey to becoming a quiet warrior starts.
Definitely. And I want to repeat some of the things you mentioned. First of all, for all of you out there that are quiet, nothing is wrong with you. You're perfect the way you are. So I think this is one of the things that happened, at least personally to me, that I kept judging myself for being quiet, for being introverted, from not being like a loud extrovert person. And there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have to change who you are. And the second thing I heard from you is you have a responsibility to show to the world your greatness, all the value that you bring. It's like a moral obligation, even. Also, you mentioned being quiet doesn't mean not being a great leader, and being calm in the storm.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you show to the world your wisdom? So you mentioned public speaking. What else? What
Public
does it look
speaking
like?
Public speaking is probably the thing most introverts don't like and
Yeah.
try to avoid. So if they can avoid it, if they can help it, they would not want to be there. But sometimes it's necessary as part of your work
Yeah.
that you have to stand in front of people, you have to present, you have to defend your case, you have to give an update. So I always say start with the smallest, safest possible step that feels like a stretch for you, a micro action. Don't make a big leap and expect yourself to be somebody different tomorrow because you're not that way wired and you're going to feel very unsafe. So safety has to be number one. You have to calibrate your nervous system in such a way that you feel safe to speak. So make it in a small group if possible. Make it one on one because those are these kinds of situations where introverts flourish. They're very good at speaking one on one, very good with a small group, but anything too big makes them feel a bit flustered. So build it up slowly. It's a muscle. Like anything
Yeah.
else, it's a skill, it can be learned. Every person is going to take a different length of time, so there's no rush, no deadline for that. But you can keep going, you can keep building on it. Just start somewhere, start where you are, and speak up a little bit more each time. And it doesn't always have to be speaking up as well. There are other ways to be visible. For instance, you could follow up with people, you could send an email, a memo, a little voice note, a little video. There are all kinds of ways to keep other people informed. The important thing is to communicate it because I think with introverts and visibility, we think that we have to be talking as much as other people who are naturally wired to be boisterous or loud. Speak up enough and let people know you exist, that you're doing the work, that they're doing great work, that your team is on track, or that you've spotted some problems and you are solving those problems. So it's that communication, that frequent, consistent communication in whichever way suits you best, that helps the introvert to be more visible.
Yeah. So, first of all, for all of you introverts, I mean, Serena and I are both quiet and introverts, right? I can say that. And here we are doing a live stream. It's not the most comfortable thing for both of us, so we're doing it. So I think, like, the message that we want to give you here, first of all, you have to expand your comfort zone. You cannot just stay comfortable. And I know that staying comfortable is just being quiet. That's the most comfortable thing to me as well. But you have to expand it. You have to find opportunities, as Serena, as you said, like, depending where you're at. It could be talking just with your manager, maybe having a conversation with your manager you've never had before, sharing your aspirations, asking for something. It could be in a team meeting. And then you start talking about visibility. Before we dive into how to become visible, what is even visibility for you? How do you define that, being visible?
Such a good question. I think the important thing is, like you said, we have to define it for ourselves first before somebody else defines it for us. Because we may be making assumptions about what visibility is and what it looks like. And maybe we think it has to be very loud, very talking over people, or always having something to say, or thinking on your feet. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that. So we think about what catches our eye. What is it that we are noticing about other people? What makes them visible? Is it the way they present themselves? Is it the body language? Is it the substance of what they say? The way they say it? There are all kinds of different ways. And I've noticed in meetings, in group meetings, you have those people who have a lot to say. Sometimes they say it before they have filtered it. And then you have people who don't seem to say very much or actually stay very quiet. And people think they are not paying attention or they're not engaging or they're not contributing. And I think that's where the misunderstanding is. It's to do with the wiring of the brain, which is different for introverts and extroverts. So the extrovert will need to speak first in order to think, and the introvert is the opposite. They need to think first and then they speak. So while we're assuming somebody who's just listening quietly is not doing anything, there's actually a lot of weight lifting mentally that's going on. They're processing, they're noticing what everyone's saying, they're taking it all in, synthesizing it, reorganizing it, looking for loopholes, looking for exceptions, and then looking for the right moment to say something. So if we create a space for them, these quiet achievers, to feel safe to say something without people trying to talk over them, they're more likely to speak up. But also from a self-responsibility, self-leadership point of view, the introverted team member, I would also encourage them to look for ways to speak up. There's not always a perfect opportunity. The timing may not line up. Agendas can be very rushed and there's another meeting after that. And so you might not find the time to say what you wanted to say, but you can still contribute. You can, offer a recap, you can offer a clarification, you can ask a question, and of course you can follow up after the meeting as well. So it doesn't always have to be a huge performance. Performance puts pressure on the introvert. It makes them feel like I have to say something because I'll be judged if I don't say anything. And then that's not their best moment because their best way of flourishing is when they have enough space to think through what they want to say, and then they have the space to articulate what they want to say, and people are around them are also being supportive and actually actively listening. And that doesn't always happen, but we can conjure up those situations for ourselves if we are creative.
How would that look like? So, I know from my experience. So, first of all, so much relate to all of that. I always felt uncomfortable talking in meetings, and it was very difficult for me to find how to chime in, how to actually say something when you have so many extroverts in the room and everyone is talking over each other and no one is really thinking about the quiet person like me that wants to say something and doesn't find the space to do that. What are some creative ways that you can see that someone like me that is quiet can actually say something that I want to say in a meeting full of extroverts who don't really create a space?
Mm. I think one of the best ways is to have an ally in the room. So whether that's the
Yeah,
facilitator themselves or whether it's a colleague who understands that your temperament is this way and that you do your best work when you are able to have that space to speak and then actively creates that space for you. And the other way would be to either be the first or the second person to speak in the meeting so that you seize the opportunity and then after that you can sit back and listen. That's another way. I know that a lot of introverts would say, oh, but I want to time it properly. I want to make sure it's the right moment to jump in. And I don't think there's ever a right moment in a place that's fast paced and dynamic. Sometimes you just miss those moments. So what do you do next? You do the second best thing. You can follow up with somebody one on one. You can send an email, offer a recap, ask to see your manager, have that private 10-minute chat with them to offer your thoughts and what you think should happen next and so on. So I think there are a couple of different ways that we can insert ourselves into the conversation even after it's over.
definitely we can do that. I find Zoom or like virtual meetings sometimes make it a little bit easier just because you can use the chat or you can use the raise hand feature, assuming you have a moderator that actually looks into that.
Mm.
I was actually facilitating a talk yesterday, and I noticed that I'm actually pretty good at this. Like, I was really noticing who is raising hands, who is raising before others, and giving everyone the opportunity to speak up. So I think this is a message also that you need some kind of moderation in meetings. You need someone to be in charge and to be really looking, paying attention for those who are quiet or for, So I found this raise hand feature really useful, actually.
Yes, yes, and we can do that in person as well. Although it does make us look like we are still students in the classroom. But
Yeah,
sometimes
that
that's the
looks a
only
little bit
way.
awkward,
It
like
does look
raising.
awkward. But sometimes that could be the only way to get attention. But I would say, yes, a good facilitator would notice all these things, would pick up on the dynamics, would know that, certain personalities need to be given a space to flourish, and certain personalities need to be managed in terms of how much air they're actually taking in a particular meeting.
Yeah. And Serena, what would you say to someone like the one like me? Okay, so I'm trying to follow up. I'm trying to speak. I'm trying to be visible, and yet I feel like I'm left behind. I'm not considered for opportunities or for promotion. True thing. It happened to me actually in my career in the past. So, what would you say to someone like me? What can I do to change that?
I think the first thing you want to ask yourself is the environment right for you? Is that the place that you actually want to continue staying at? Because if you are, then of course certain strategies will follow. But if
Mm-hmm.
you realize that maybe what's the real problem is not it's not me, it's the environment. It is not supportive of people like me. Maybe I need to go find a different kind of work environment where they are more receptive to, you know, diverse personalities, diverse ways of thinking. So that's one level of looking at it. And the other one, assuming you are staying on, you are happy there, you can see that there's a pathway to progression for you and you really want that promotion, then there are so many factors because in the performance review they might tell you um, you are nearly there, you tick most of the boxes, we know you're very competent, you've proven everything. But when it comes to that, making that next leap, let's say you are middle management and you're trying to get to C-suite level, it's a different set of skills. It's a different kind of readiness. It's not just about proving competence, it's also, are you demonstrating leadership? What does
Mm-hmm.
leadership look like from your board of directors perspective, from your partner's perspective? What do they see you as contributing on that level from a strategic point of view? Or are you still coming across as someone who's very, very competent technically at what you do, but then they don't quite see you as a leader because they say, oh, she lacks strategic communication skills, she doesn't have executive presence. All these are the kind of jargon that's used to describe, but it also reflects on what the environment is looking for. So
Yeah.
that's why the first question I would ask is there a mismatch between you and the system you are in?
Yeah, but being strategic and executive presence a lot of times are buzzwords, and it's really hard to quantify what does it actually mean. And I would also say that, yeah, like environments are complex, and I've seen that in many companies. Like any companies you will go to, I mean, you will still need to kind of find a way, find a way to make it work. So assuming the environment is okay, it may not be perfect, but you can work with that, and you still want to stay there. How do you build that in your perspective? Like how do you actually make yourself
Yes.
visible in a way that, as you said, like
Mm.
I think you kind of answered in the in a way like that is seen by the executives or leadership that you are a leader.
I think one of the best ways is to come out of that silo mentality of trying to do everything yourself and to
Yeah.
collaborate a lot more. I remember when, in my previous experience, my obsession was to get things done well. And sometimes I thought that the best person to do it was me myself without consulting others, because if the more people I talk to, the more complicated it gets. There'll be too many questions. There'll be the risk of making mistakes and so on. So I try to do a lot of things myself, and I realize now that that is not positioning myself for leadership. You want to be able to have that wide ranging ability to communicate across different teams, different departments. Be that kind of person who is actively engaging, collaborating, working with, supporting other people,
Mm-hmm.
because that gets you seen from a different perspective. It's not just you in your little silo doing your job well, it's also how are you actively linking up with other people for a common purpose. And that, I believe, positions you very differently. When I see someone like that who is proactively reaching out, collaborating, working with, supporting other people, asking how can I help, with this whatever thing you are doing, I see that person as, taking the whole big picture in mind. They have the organization's goals and vision and so on in mind. They're not just thinking of their own job description.
Definitely, I agree with you, and I learned for many years, right, of judging myself that, and I think this applies to a lot of introverts. Like we may not feel comfortable in a large group, especially if there are a lot of loud voices, but we feel much more comfortable and we can communicate very well when it's one on one. So I want to encourage all of you, like, yes, connect with people, try to be someone that brings value, that is helpful. And it's much easier to do it when it's one on one than in a group.
That's really leveraging the introvert advantage. If you are good at one-on-one, good in one in small groups, use that. Use that often.
Yeah,
It becomes something that you enjoy using, but it's got its own ripple effect. People see you as helpful, they see you as supportive, and they want to work with you.
definitely. And I want to leave our audience with something tangible that they can take today. So, what is one first step that someone who is listening to us, who is a quiet, high performer individual, can take today?
I would say to start practicing how to be more visible in a small way that feels safe for you. Just one action and then slowly add to it. Because you are building your muscle, it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to feel like it's out of your depth at the beginning. But the more you do it, the more confident you become, and that confidence shows. So confidence doesn't come it doesn't come before. It shows up after. It shows up with the reps. And the more consistent you are, the more confident you are, and the more courageous you are in taking that first step. It shows. There's a ripple effect. There's a different kind of energy that goes out that shows people she is doing things, she's making an effort, she is connecting, she's collaborating. And yes, I can see her progressing. and getting closer and closer to that place where in the next performance review, it's going to be an easy yes for you to get to the next role.
Yeah, and you mentioned uncomfortable. So take one uncomfortable step. So we talked about different things, right? Speaking up in some fashion, right? It could be with your manager or one on one, or in a team meeting, or maybe in a larger forum. It could be reaching out to people that maybe you haven't talked to and you should. Right? We all know that, yeah, we should build relationships with people, and a lot of times we feel uncomfortable. Oh, why would that person want to talk to me? So ask yourself another question: how can I bring value to that other person or different perspective? So do something uncomfortable today, something small, right? We talk about taking small steps forward.
That's right. Small steps that feel safe for you, but they are still uncomfortable because they are expanding your comfort zone.
Exactly. I like to say it's uncomfortable but not terrifying. So it's still but still it has to be something that you maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable and afraid to do. That's a good thing. Actually, it's a sign of growth.
Yes. Yes. That shows you have a growth mindset.
For sure. And Serena, tell us a little bit about how can our audience find you and what you do.
The best way for them to find me, for your audience to find me, is on my website, serenalow.com.au. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I post several times a week. And I'm also the host of the Quiet Warrior podcast, which is principally for introverts and quiet achievers, about the myths and the gifts of introversion. So those are the best places to find me.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for a great conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.